I'm very excited to bring this to you guys. Before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to give a huge thanks to our sponsors, RALI of Iowa, Genesis Philanthropy, UnityPoint, Robert Young Center, Center for Alcohol and Drug Services, and to Dave Donovan at Scott County Emergency Management. And there's many more. Won't be able to get to everybody, but those are the big contributors, and we greatly appreciate their help. And like I said, this is our 4th annual Red Ribbon Week. Next year, we want to be able to do this in person, but we want to thank you for being here. We're going to have a questions and answers session at the end of our 3 speakers. Please, there's a function at the bottom of the Zoom where you can type in your questions, and I will take the questions again at the end of the presentation from all 3 speakers. And we'll also have resources that we're going to send. We're going to give an email out to everybody that registered on just resources for drug prevention and awareness. So our first speaker I'd like to introduce is Brooke Brown. She is a manager for the Robert Young Center and the CADS. She's been a manager there for 9 years. She has been in the substance abuse field for 9 years, and she's going to talk about opiate use in the United States. So Brooke, please take it from here.
You're muted, Brooke.
Sorry about that, some technical errors. So my name is Brooke Brown. I am the Robert Young Center for Alcohol and Drug Services, Substance Use Disorder Outpatient and Prevention Manager. I have been in the field of substance use since 2014. I am a certified addictions counselor with the Iowa Board of Certification. With my experience, I have worked in a variety of settings, residential and outpatient, as well as with a variety of populations, including adolescents and adults. Friendly reminder, if you have any questions, please put that in the
Dave, I'm having a hell of a
press
time
that
here.
at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and share my
I
PowerPoint
can
here.
see,
I believe there are some
Dr.
individuals who
Burke,
may
I
not be
can
on
see,
mute.
you know, but Brooke, mine won't come up. No, I can't even hear the other meeting.
So I'm having some issues here sharing my screen. It looks like it's disabled. If I could please get access to be able to do that.
Yeah. And then we just.
Go ahead, Brooke. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Thank you.
I apologize.
So today we're going to talk about the opioid crisis in America and the cost of abuse. So I first wanted to start off talking about the waves of the opiate epidemic. So in the 1960s, 4 out of 5 heroin addicts began with heroin, but by 2000s, 3 out of 4 heroin addicts began either with prescription opioids obtained legally through a doctor's prescription or illegally from someone else's prescription. So with prescription narcotics in the 1990s, pain became a symptom to address with patients. Instead of being pain tolerant, we became pain-free. Drug companies really pushed doctors to prescribe to eliminate that pain. They lied about abuse, addiction, and overdose deaths. From 2005 to 2010, we really saw the rise of heroin. The federal government actually stepped in and required reduction of prescribing opioid painkillers. Heroin made the big jump after the doctors cut off patients for the opioid prescriptions. There is an ease of access of getting it on the streets as well. From 2013 to present, we have seen the rise of the synthetic opioids. There's a big jump due to ordering these over the internet as a food supplement from China. They're delivered to our homes by United States Postal Office and FedEx and smuggled into the county by the Mexico drug cartels, excuse me. Oops, went too fast. So we've had some national responses to the threat. The Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act of 2016 authorizes over $181 million every year to respond to the epidemic of opioid misuse. With this act, we've been able to expand prevention and educational efforts, expanded availability of naloxone to law enforcement, expanded disposal sites for unwanted prescription medications, launched evidence-based treatment and medicated-assisted treatment, and strengthened prescription drug monitoring programs. With the prescription drug monitoring programs, or the PDMPs, those platforms do differ by states. The state platforms do not interact with one another. Depending on location, certain areas are not required to participate, including emergency rooms, hospice care, and some others. Controlled drug prescribers or dispensers are required to join and register on the PDMP. All pharmacists are required to enter the prescription into that state PDMP, and depending which state, it can be daily or weekly reporting. Missouri is actually our only state currently without a PDMP. The CDC does recommend prescribing limits of no longer than 7 days and no greater than 90 MME, which is that morphine milligram equivalent. And that's per day in 2018. And as of August 2021, 38 states had responded to the opioid epidemic by implementing policies and guidelines to set limits on the supply of opioids that can be prescribed by doctors. The opioid limits in 5 of those states only apply to Medicaid recipients. 2 of those states have no set pill or day limit for opioid prescriptions, but requires doctors to prescribe that least effective dose. We have seen criminal prosecution with major pharmacies such as McKesson Corporation, Walgreens, Johnson & Johnson. These pharmacies or distributors have been charged with evading federal opioid prescription regulations. They've paid billions of dollars in fines, and they've been charged under that racketeer influenced, and corrupt organization statute. So the highest risk groups for opioid overdose: white non-Hispanic males, age ranges from 18 to 25 years old, people with lower socioeconomic status, males outnumber females by 53%, and women are actually more likely to abuse opioids. Counties with higher prescribing, what we see is generally smaller cities or larger towns, a higher percentage of white residents, a higher number of dentists and primary care providers per capita, high number of uninsured, underinsured, or unemployed, and more residents who have diabetes, arthritis, or disability. So what is the prevalence of opioid misuse? So the CDC estimates that the total cost of prescription opioid misuse alone is $78.5 billion a year, including the cost of healthcare, lost productivity, addiction treatment, and criminal justice involvement. So in 2019, nearly 50,000 people in the US died from an opioid-involved overdose. That rate has increased to over 4% since 2018. In 2019 in Illinois, we had 2,790 individuals die from an opioid-involved overdose, and in Iowa, we had 352. 70% of all drug overdoses in 2019 involved an opioid. Roughly 21 to 29% of patients prescribed an opioid for chronic pain do misuse them. In 2017, we were seeing 58 opioid prescriptions were written for every 100 Americans. Between 8 to 12% of people using an opioid for chronic pain develop an opioid disorder. 4 to 6% who misuse prescription opioids do transition to heroin, and about 80% of people who use heroin first use prescription opioids. So this next slide is kind of just identifying how the coronavirus has impacted the pandemic. So over 81,000 drug overdose deaths deaths have occurred in the US in the 12 months ending in May 2020, which is the highest number ever recorded in a 12-month period. According to death certificates, estimates were made that translate to over 250 deaths each day that have been ruled as drug overdose deaths. Monthly deaths grew by 50% between February 2020 and May 2020 to more than 9,000. Overdose deaths increased in almost every state during the first 8 months of 2020. Social isolation and pandemic-related stress are contributing factors to the substance use and overdose. The isolation makes individuals vulnerable to negative outcomes because it interferes with their support systems. Support systems are very critical for people to help reach and sustain recovery. People have more stress now also because of the uncertainty with COVID. People were unsure about their employment. They had a lot of health concerns, COVID impacting them personally or family members. Substance use disorder is a health condition and identified by the CDC for increasing a person's risk for contracting COVID and becoming severely ill from COVID. So this next slide is just talking about the different types of opioids. So when we're talking about opioids, we're referring to that entire family of opiates, including natural, synthetic, and semi-synthetic. So we have 3 types of heroin. We have white, brown, and black tar, codeine, fentanyl, hydrocodone and acetaminophen, hydromorphine, Demerol, loperamide, morphine, oxycodone and acetaminophen, oxycodone and naloxone, oxymorphine, tramadol, and kratom. So a couple of the underlying ones I want to talk about a little bit more specifically. The first one is the loperamide, which is also known as Imodium. It's 40 to 50 times stronger than morphine. It's only used for intestinal issues. The max dose is 8 milligrams per day. However, with a prescription, you can get up to 16 milligrams. High doses cross the brain-blood barrier to cause high. Abuse levels have been noted to as many as 200 to 600 pills daily. And the next one is kratom. We are seeing that much more in our communities. Kratom is actually sold as an herbal supplement. Low doses, 2 to 5 milligrams, 2 to 3 times per week, have some pain relieving effects. However, high doses, 5 to 10 milligrams per day, can actually cause addiction and withdrawal. Has a very similar effects to opioids. It's 13 times more powerful than morphine. It's ordered from Southeast Asia, where it is illegal, and sold on the internet in head shops and gas stations across the US. It's not regulated by the FDA. As a controlled substance, it's deemed illegal in 6 states, including Alabama, Rhode Island, Vermont, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Arkansas. It's also banned in Illinois to the sale of minors. This next slide just illustrates some different types of opioids. The first picture here is white heroin. Second picture is brown heroin. The third is black tar. The fourth is carfentanil. The fifth is a fentanyl patch. And then 6, 7, and 8 are all different types of fentanyl pills. So with the white heroin, it can be taken by injection, insufflation, smoking, inhalation, rectally or orally. The brown heroin is actually less soluble than the white heroin and less powerful. It's typically smoked. Then the black tar in solid form, it is heated up, mixed with water, and used typically an IV injection. Carfentanil here in this fourth picture, it is actually a large animal tranquilizer. 2 milligrams can actually knock out an elephant for 6 to 8 hours. The next picture was just that fentanyl patch, And then 6, 7, and 8 here are all different types of fentanyl pills. There's over 237 different analogs for fentanyl, and these formulas can be found on the internet. The DEA warns currently that fentanyl pills are currently flooding our market, being disguised as legitimate prescriptions, and it takes only 2 milligrams of fentanyl to be considered a deadly dose, and 2 out of every 5 pills are containing that lethal dose of fentanyl. So just 1 pill can actually kill. This next slide is just demonstrating some strengths of opioids. All opioid medications are measured against that morphine milligram equivalent, or that MME. So tramadol is 1/10, Demerol is 1/10, codeine is 1/3, hydrocodone is the same, oxycodone is 1/5 times, Clonidazine is 3 times, Dilaudid is 4 times, heroin is 5 times, acetylfentanyl is 25 to 75 times, fentanyl is 5 to 100 times, acrylfentanyl is 5 to 10 times stronger and can last 2 times longer. This one is actually resistant to naloxone. And then carfentanil is 100 to 1,000 times that morphine milligram equivalent. So carfentanil is actually believed to be a gas that was pumped into the Russian government, pumped into the Moscow theater by the Russian government in the terrorist attacks in 2002. There was 800 people in the theater. 170 people died after a 57-hour standoff. The gas was used to disarm the terrorists before they had the opportunity to detonate their explosives. There's a few others not mentioned on here. There's a furylfentanyl. It's actually so strong it can cause overdose through being absorbed through the skin. And there's an omefentanil, which is 6,300 times stronger than morphine. 1 ounce, 28 grams, less than the weight of a AA battery, can actually kill 175 million people. This next picture is just identifying the amounts of heroin, fentanyl, and carfentanil that it could take to overdose. The penny here is just to put in perspective. That's a 2 milligram dose, what it would take to kill someone. Federal agents on the southern border have said they have seen a 4,000% increase in fentanyl seizures in the past 3 years. Fentanyl is becoming a drug of choice for the cartels because it's highly profitable, extremely potent, and really easy to smuggle. It's so small, a lot of times it's just being sent through the mail. 1 kilogram of pure fentanyl from China costs about $3,300 to $5,000. It can be turned into a diluted powder sold on San Diego streets at a $300,000 value. According to the DEA, as it travels further away from the border, the price actually skyrockets. If it's in pill form, 1 kilogram of pure fentanyl can be made into 1 million pills containing 1 milligram of fentanyl each. You can sell each pill for $10 to $20 a piece on the street, and that's a $10 million to $20 million product. So how are we affected? Normal use with opioids, we get that feeling of euphoria, some pain relief, maybe drowsiness, some sedation. Opioid abuse, though, we can get excessive drowsiness, some lethargy, paranoia, anxiety, irritability, respiratory depression, and nausea. Tolerance to opioids causes that increased need to use more. So some side effects of opioid use that we see: nausea and vomiting. Some opioids actually can cause nausea and vomiting as soon as that touches the tongue. Abnormal distension and bloating. Distension can actually lead to burst stomach. Stomach issues are very common with opioid use. Dehydration, constipation, seizures and coma, hallucinations may occur with or without the seizures. Liver damage, cirrhosis, all organs can be affected by that opioid use. This can include delayed gastric emptying, which can lead to ulcers or bloating, increase in feeling pain with opioid use, immunological dysfunctions, AIDS, hepatitis, hormonal dysfunctions causing weight gain, fatigue, impotence, weakened immune system, and muscle jerks. Brain damage due to hypoxia resulting from respiratory depression and development of tolerance and dependence. So what is your risk? Accidental contact. Bare hands or skin can be washed with soap and water to remove accidental overdose risk. You must ingest the opioid for it to infect you. Opioids have a high burn rate, meaning by the time exhaled from smoking, little to no opioids are going to be present in that smoke, so you can't get high from the smoke. Cuts and scrapes are a light avenue of accidental contact. Access to your bloodstream. Nitrile gloves are actually designed to prevent that accidental contact and that spread of AIDS and hepatitis. Open wounds or sores. You might have blood and needles and other materials will increase that risk for your viruses. AIDS virus is more unlikely to be contracted. However, hepatitis C is more likely. This one can actually live outside the human body in dried blood for up to 6 weeks. And then hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer actually opens our pores and raises that risk for viral infection. Alcohol-based can open pores up to 8 hours. Non-alcohol will open pores for 4 hours. I do want to be clear that we are not identifying not to use hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer is very effective in the pandemic, and we should continue to use that to help reduce that risk for viruses. So what can you do? You want to encourage individuals and talk to patients about ways to avoid accidental prescription poisonings. You don't want to adjust your own dose, skip doses, or take extra doses. You want to use your prescriptions as directed. You don't want to mix with other drugs and or alcohol, and safe storage and disposal of all and any medications. So encourage individuals to participate in the drug take-back days in their communities. Be aware of where you can drop off those drugs. So whether it's a pharmacy or a police station, utilize a safe disposal kit to dispose of unwanted prescriptions. They actually make kits now that you can dispose of prescriptions at home. The doTERRA pouches, which is actually a powder that you can put your prescription in, mix with water, and it dissolves it. So we want to avoid accidental overdose. The National Institute on Drug Abuse states that between 40 and 60% of recovering drug addicts will eventually relapse. With heroin, those rates are even higher. Some experts place that rate of relapse for as high as 80%, which means that the recovery rate may be as low as 20%. Hence, they are at a greater risk for overdose. Have naloxone present during use. Naloxone kits are available from the pharmacy. No prescription is needed. Do not use alone or in a locked room. That's very important. Taste the drug first. See what that reaction will be. Abusers know what drug effects they're looking for. So if we encourage them to kind of taste that substance and see if they have that adverse reaction, they're going to be less likely, to use that substance if they have that bad reaction. Know your dosage and amount. Sudden changes in use will raise that risk. Know the purity. Prescription is more pure than what we see on the street. Do not mix with other drugs or alcohol. Certain medications, foods, and supplements can actually increase what the opioids do. Using opioids and other depressants will increase that risk for overdose. And avoid IV needle injection as that route for delivery. Rates vary from sources. For intravenous drug use, 92 to 95% fail to recover from use. So what is an overdose? An overdose is not like what we see on the TV or movies. We don't inject something and then keel over and die. An overdose is a condition. It usually occurs within 1 to 3 hours. It's not an immediate process as soon as you use that opioid. An overdose may be caused by an excess intake of opioids. It may be caused a combination of opioids with food and medications, or it can be an opioid used with someone with a medical condition. Increasing amount taking or using 2 types of opioids increases that risk of overdose. Certain foods and medication can increase or decrease strength. Examples, grapefruit can actually increase the opioid strength. Tramadol can cause seizures. Certain GI meds, antibiotics, anti-anxiety, depressants, antifungal, cardiac meds, and some herbal products will actually increase the opioid strength, which can lead to overdose. So overdose versus over-medication. Over-medication is very similar to overdose signs, but the person affected is most often thought to be drunk or suffering from dementia, Parkinson's, or some other mental dysfunction. So with over-medication, we see unusual sleepiness, drowsiness, difficulty staying awake, mental confusion, slurred speech, intoxicating behaviors, slow or shallow breathing. They will have extremely small pinpoint pupils, a slow heartbeat, low blood pressure, difficulty waking from sleep. With overdose, they may have extreme sleepiness, inability to awake, breathing problems, their fingernails and lips might turn blue and purple. They may have extremely small pinpoint pupils and have a slow heartbeat and or blood pressure. With overdose, sometimes we have that exhaled breath with a very distinct labored sound coming from our throat. This sounds like a gurgling or snoring. People often refer to this as the death rattle. So what can we do? Overdose prevention. Naloxone or Narcan, nasal or injection are available. With the injection, it can be injected into a vein, a muscle, or under the skin. Naloxone does not cause a high. It blocks the receptor sites for opioids. It is the only FDA-approved drug for immediate overdose reversal. It only works when opioids are in the body, so it won't harm you. There's no potential for abuse. It may wear off sooner due to opioid amount used and strength of that opioid. Typically, it does work within 3 to 5 minutes, and you want to wait 2 to 3 minutes for additional doses. There is no maximum dose. An individual may need multiple doses, and with the fentanyl problem in our community, we are seeing individuals having to have multiple doses. Typically, it will start to wear off in about 30 minutes and mostly out of the system after 90. And it is safe to use in children and pregnant women. So with using naloxone, call 911 and try to arouse, check for the signs of an overdose, determine if over-medication may be the cause, give supportive breathing when indicated, and continue as needed. And then use naloxone, even if in doubt. Again, it's not going to harm an individual. The next thing, the next thing I'm going to show you is a video. I just want to make sure we have sound.
This is Narcan nasal spray. It comes in a box with 2 doses. You're going to take 1 dose out of the box, remove it from the packaging, and the applicator goes in 1 nostril, and you're going to depress the plunger with a quick, firm push. When putting in the applicator, you'll want to form a tight seal with the patient's nose so that the medication goes up into the sinuses and does not come down the face. And then with a quick, firm push, you're going to administer the medication. There's no need to depress the other nostril. You can leave it open. And if a second dose is needed, you will apply it in the other nostril than the one that the first dose was given in. And that's how you use the Narcan nasal spray.
So that video is just to kind of demonstrate the use of the nasal spray. So what do we expect afterwards? Naloxone will continue to work, but symptoms may return. More than 1 dose may be needed. Put that person in that recovery position, and this picture is demonstrating that recovery position. Lay them on their side if the person is breathing independently. When they're on their side, their legs should be brought up and their arm crossed over to prevent rolling onto the back and choking if they vomit. This also allows the lungs greater expansion to allow oxygen in. You want to stay with the person until help arrives. Comfort that person being treated. Some people may become confused, agitated, or combative when we use that. We want to help them to remain calm. And then naloxone will cause opioid withdrawal. So withdrawal symptoms will appear typically within 15 minutes after the naloxone use. Some of the withdrawal symptoms that we see here: body aches, diarrhea, fast heart rate, fever, runny nose, sneezing, goosebumps, sweating, watery eyes, yawning, nausea or vomiting, nervousness, restlessness, irritability, shivering, trembling, abdominal cramps, weakness, and increased blood pressure. The bolded ones that you see typically are going to be the first to appear, followed by the others. So what not to do? What is depicted in movies and TV is not real life. So don't wait to act. Every second counts. Don't slap or try to forcefully stimulate a person. This is only going to cause further injury. If shouting, rubbing knuckles on the sternum, or pinching will not awake that person, he or she is probably unconscious. Don't put that person into a cold bath or shower. That cold bath or shower is really dangerous, and it will actually slow down the body function more than just the overdose. It increases that risk for falling, drowning, or going into shock. Don't inject the person with any other substance. And don't make that person vomit what he or she may have swallowed. The vomiting, they could actually choke on it, or it could get into their lungs. So storage of naloxone. Naloxone has an 18 to 24-month shelf life. The following storage instructions hold true for each type of naloxone kit. So we don't want to freeze it. We want to protect it from direct sunlight. The sunlight can actually cause diminished effects. Protect it from heat. The device is plastic, so it might melt. As with any medication, please keep it away from children. Use safe practices, be aware of expiration dates. Expired naloxone can still be administered if there's no other alternative available. It may not be as effective and a second dose may be required. Naloxone actually can be used up to 2 years after that expiration date. So in this stigma, addiction is a disease. It's not a choice we make, nor is it a moral failing. Addiction does not discriminate. Every gender, race, age, and socioeconomic status can and will be affected. Everyone knows someone who has been impacted by addiction. Every 12 minutes, someone dies from an opioid-related overdose. 90% of opioid overdoses are accidental, and 1 out of 4 people have been directly impacted by the opioid crisis. So how do I seek services? A substance use evaluation is required to set up treatment. We utilize the American Society of Addictive Medicine 6 dimensions to determine that least restrictive level of care. With our services, we do follow the continuum of care. So if you start out in IOP, we like to see that stair-step model where you end with continuing care. At CADS, Robert Young Center, we do offer detox services, inpatient, outpatient, intensive outpatient, extended outpatient, continuing care, and early intervention services. We see adults and adolescents. We do individual, group counseling, case management. We do have a women and men specific group programming. We have co-occurring programming. So there are a lot of services they can receive. Robert Young Center and Center for Alcohol and Drug Services also offers medicated assisted treatment for opioids, including but not limited to methadone, Suboxone, buprenorphine, and naltrexone. So there's some local resources for help. Call 911 if it's an emergency requiring immediate assistance. I have included the Robert Young Center, Center for Alcohol and Drug Services centralized scheduling line. That's 309-779-3000. You can also utilize the SAMHSA treatment locator to find local services in your area. And I actually put that link up here as well. That's the findtreatment.gov. And that one's really nice because you can type in a zip code and it tells you all treatment available within however many miles you would like. With our outpatient clinics, we are currently offering a walk-in evaluation procedure. So clients are able to be seen first day when they come in to walk in, Monday through Friday. It's first come, first serve. This last page is just my references. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brooke. That was great information and definitely learned a lot there. So thank you again for taking the time to share that with us. Questions, we will please put your questions in the Q&A for Brooke, and we will go over those when the last speaker is done with. So I want to introduce our second speaker. This is Lieutenant Smull. He has been in police force for 26 years with the Davenport Police Department. He is with all aspects of, he's worked with all aspects of narcotic enforcement, and we are lucky to have him here. He is
Dave, I can't hear him.
He is the night shift commander for the Davenport Police Department. So he works the night shift. So this is great that he's here. And Lieutenant Smull, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, wonderful. All right. So take it away. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me to participate in this very important topic. My name is Lieutenant Kevin Smull, and I've been with the police department for, well, going on 27 years. To give you a little background of what I've done in my 27 years is most of my career, over half of it has been involved in narcotics enforcement. So I've been trained up for this type of awareness. My presentation today is going to be more of the fact of awareness program. I'm going to have several slides of various paraphernalia drugs, so the citizens of this community can actually, when they see this, what to do with it, and some background on it. Next slide, please. In beginning my presentation, what is prescription drug abuse? Well, I can tell you prescription drug abuse is when someone takes medication inappropriately, such as without a prescription, in a way other than prescribed. And for most of the people I've talked to that are addicted to these various drugs for the high. The problem that we're seeing is every day in the United States, we have thousands of teenagers on a daily basis trying prescription drugs or various drugs for the first time. Prescription drugs are the most abused drugs by our teenagers after alcohol, marijuana, and tobacco. Why do people use? Well, to experiment with, escape depression and boredom, and with COVID last year, that contributed to a high number of overdoses, enjoyment of risky behavior, belief that drugs solve personal problems, and sometimes peer pressure to fit in. Some of the myths that go along with this abuse is prescription drugs are safer to abuse than other drugs because they're prescribed by a doctor. That isn't necessarily true. Using stimulant medications such as Adderall or Ritalin can help teens do well in school by improving their energy. That's also a myth. Commonly used prescription drugs that we've seen in this community, opioids commonly prescribed to treat pain, stimulants commonly prescribed to treat ADHD, your central nervous system depressants, your Percocets, and your Xanax to treat anxiety and sleep disorders. Your opiates, powerful, highly addictive drugs that are derived from the poppy plant. Primary use, again, to relieve pain. Your common opiates, your morphine, your heroin, your Oxycontin, your oxycodone, your Percocets, your Vicodins, and then, of course, fentanyl. You can see in this illustration, I have up at the top fake Percocet pills. Without reading the caption below, can you identify which one's a counterfeit and what's actually a real opioid pill? Can you go back to the last slide, please? You can see the top left, the M30, that's a trend that's going across the country. Actually, they're oxycodone pills, but if you look below that, that's a counterfeit oxycodone pill that actually has fentanyl in it. The same for the middle picture. You can see the actual true pill and then a counterfeit pill. And then off to the right, you have the authentic Xanax, Xanny bars, you would call them, versus the counterfeit Xanax bars. They all contain fentanyl. Next, please. Your stimulants, drugs that speed up the central nervous system. Common stimulants, caffeine, nicotine, cocaine, methamphetamine, amphetamine, MDMA, which is also known as ecstasy, and then bath salts. Bath salts is actually methadone. Cocaine, strong stimulant, commonly snorted or injected into the vein. Common paraphernalia used to ingest cocaine, what we would refer to as snort tubes, straws, pins, rolled up dollar bills, razor blades, plates, and mirrors. Crack cocaine. Crack cocaine is a strong stimulant, highly addictive drug, smokable form of cocaine, sold in rock form in this area for $20, $50, and $100 increments. Your $20 rock would weigh between 1/10 of a gram to 2/10 of a gram, which is the size of the eraser on a pencil. Your $50 rocks are sold at 3/10 of a gram to 5/10 of a gram, and then your $1 increments are a gram. Paraphernalia associated with crack cocaine use are metal or glass tube with Brillo in one end to act as a filter, and they smoke it. They also crush up crack cocaine and sprinkle it on marijuana cigars which they call primos. And then you have your methamphetamine. What we're seeing across this community and across the nation is ice methamphetamine, which is one of your pure forms of methamphetamine that's taken over for the traditional one pot or Nazi method manufacturing powdered methamphetamine. I would say a good majority of the ice methamphetamine coming into this country is coming from cartels down in Mexico. Methamphetamine continues. It's a stimulant discovered in 1893. It's synthetic, injected, snorted, or smoked. Most often used recreationally, but does have some medical use, like other amphetamines, to treat ADHD and obesity. It's also can be produced in garage labs, one pot method, red phosphorus method, and anhydrous ammonia method. Produced in clandestine labs in China and Mexico, and is, like I said, shipped in as methamphetamine from the borders. Half a gram goes between $30 to $50, and then a gram's between $100 to $120. Depressants, drugs that slow down the central nervous system. Common depressants are your alcohol, your barbiturates, your tranquilizers, Ambien for sleep, and Rufinol, which is also known as roofies, or the date rape drug. Commonly abused prescriptions in Iowa: opiates, fentanyl, hydrocodone, oxycodone, oxycontin, depressants, Valium and Xanax, stimulants, Ritalin, and Adderall. Some tips that I would give to monitor this is monitor your medicine cabinets at home, especially if you have these type of prescription drugs with kids around. Dispose medicines, not use, disposing medicines and just not leaving them around. If you're not using them, you can either flush them down the toilet or you can throw them away, but I would take the labels off the prescription pills and separate the pills from the bottle. There's also programs where you can drop off prescription meds at police departments and various locations that you can research on the internet. I can tell you that we do a collection once or twice a year. DEA does, I know Bettendorf PD does, and various agencies throughout this area. Next, please. To give you some numbers that I've researched for this awareness presentation, nationwide in 2020, we had 93 opioid deaths. That's 29% up from 2019. Iowa recorded 419 overdose deaths in 2020. We also recorded 213 opioid deaths in 2020, which is up 30% from 2019. Fatal overdose deaths in recent years have been the result of fentanyl use. And the problem is all the counterfeit pills and that fentanyl being purported as heroin or other drugs, and the user is not prepared for that potency. The numbers for the Davenport Police Department in 2020 that we recorded, we had 22 heroin overdose deaths. Overdose deaths resulting in death, we have 14. Of the 14 overdoses, the 14 of it were found to contain fentanyl. We have not had any carfentanil deaths this year or last year, and so far this year we have not had any, but it is in the area. 2021, January through September, we've had recorded 15 heroin overdoses. We've had 10 deaths as a result of those overdoses, and 6 of those contain fentanyl. Heroin is a highly addictive opioid, naturally occurring derived from the poppy plant. Methods of use are smoked, snorted, injected, sold in increments of 1/10 of a gram up to a gram. The cost can range from $10 to $30 for a 1/10, and it can range between $200 to $300 a gram. About $2,000 to $3,000 for an ounce, which is 28.35 grams. Packaging, and I've used this in other presentations, we have universal packaging around here, and that's sandwich baggies. They will also use aluminum foil because then once they open up the package containing the heroin, they can smoke it right off the foil. Some photographs of various packages of heroin that you can see and the paraphernalia associated with heroin use. The sandwich baggie corners that I spoke of just in the prior slide, that's the common packaging that we see in the Davenport and Quad City area. You can see in this photo that you have the aluminum foil with the burn marks where they will smoke the substance off the aluminum foil. You have your needles, which pose a different danger in itself for first responders and users. You have the spoon with the burn marks on it. That's where they add the substance to it. They add water to it, and then they heat it up and draw it into the syringe and then inject it. You have your snort tubes, your Ziploc baggies, your heat source. So you have basically a heroin kit right here. Some additional photos of what heroin looks like, and that Brooke brought up in her presentation. You have the brown, you have the tan, you have the white powdered heroin, you have the black tar heroin that is predominantly produced down in Mexico. This is a package of heroin that was seized during an investigation in Davenport. You see they use small Ziploc baggies, digital scale with to weigh the product, and the different color of heroin that it was more grayish brown color. You have your spoon with your cotton ball in the middle. That's what they use as a filter to draw up the controlled substance that they're putting in their syringe. So it somewhat is a filter of the impurities, and they can inject the substance into their vein. Additional photographs of what a heroin kit looks like and that we have seen through investigations in the city of Davenport. And then the last slide is where you can see how they smoke heroin off the tinfoil, applying the heat source underneath, and then smoking up the vapors. Fentanyl, this is becoming quite concerning for this area. We're starting to see a lot more fentanyl in the Quad City area, along with the other parts of the country, the West Coast, the East Coast. It's just going right across the country. The alarming thing is the fact that they're manufacturing counterfeit pills that are normally sold as prescription pills with the same insignias and milligram imprints on it, and it actually containing pure fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. Most fentanyl in the United States comes from China or actually clandestinely made in Mexico. Legal use, of course, is for pain management for cancer patients and various other ailments. Illegal use is mixed with heroin to increase the potency and it also is purported to be heroin. Again, we talked about the counterfeit pills. We, across this area, have seen a lot of Percocet pills hitting the market and being purported to be Percocet, but actually contain fentanyl. This is a new form of fentanyl that's being manufactured in Mexico that they discovered in Phoenix, Arizona within the past month, which is named fatty. Fatty is a rock-like substance, and when they sent this controlled substance to the lab, they found that it was mixed with tramadol, fentanyl, heroin, and parafluorofentanyl. Again, they're manufacturing things, and the users are believing that they're possibly getting heroin, and or some of them are actually purchasing fentanyl for that euphoric high, but then there's other things added to it, and that their levels of dependency may not handle this type of drug, and that's what's causing the overdoses and eventually death. Brooke talked about safe handling. We at the police department wear gloves and masks when we're dealing with any powdered substance. What we're also starting to see across this area and across the country, that cocaine, methamphetamine, and some ecstasy or MDMA is actually being tainted with fentanyl. And unfortunately, it's being purported for another drug, and that's why we're seeing an increase in the overdoses and the death. I didn't touch on carfentanil. We have seen carfentanil in this area. Carfentanil is the elephant tranquilizer that a very small amount or small exposure could lead to serious injury or death. We've had cases of that in the Quad City area, and we take very important precautions to handle that substance. I would tell anybody that has a family member that is addicted to opioids or these other controlled substances that I've talked about in this presentation, to seek out help with CADS, with Robert Young. If you encounter these type of paraphernalia or drugs, all you have to do is call 911 and we will come and collect it and do somewhat of an investigation. What we're starting to see a lot more of is when we're finding people that are overdosing in parking lots and vehicles, inside apartments and houses, is that we get medical personnel there to save them. And I myself have used Narcan on several occasions of individuals we have found unresponsive, that they're not seeking medical treatment. And that's a frustration for us because we don't want them to die. But if you are encountering it, have somebody in your family that needs assistance, please don't hesitate to call us or the professionals to get help or to seek advice. And that's the end of my presentation.
All right, great. Lieutenant Smull, thank you so much for that information and your service to the community of Davenport. Our next speaker, our third speaker, his name is Jeff Wallace, and he has spent a large part of his life studying the effects of the criminal justice system policies and procedures on at-risk youth. First, he was one of them, and then through his undergraduate and graduate degrees in criminal justice. Jeff has worked in nonprofit organizations, juvenile detention centers, and as a social worker for the Department of Human Resources. And currently, he owns and operates a consulting firm titled Vision Leadership and Productions. He often refers to himself as the reformed social worker. So, Jeff, please Take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Dr. Dirks. And so what I'm going to do first is before we even get started, let me just say that I want to thank Lieutenant Smalls and Brooke for bringing that information. That information that they provided to us is so important. It's life-saving. It's information that I definitely learned things from, and I hope everybody else learned things from. And so moving right along to my presentation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be talking about a variety of things. But sort of in order to put this in perspective, what we've been able to do is been able to see a little bit about what's in our community, right? And who works in our community with the people who actually fall victim to this serious health issue. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about my own life. And if we can move to the next slide there. I'm going to talk about my own personal life, my career, what it all means, how it all ties into what Brooke talked about, and even a little bit about what Lieutenant Smalls talked about. And in order to do that, I'm going to talk with a few different stories. In addition to that, I'm going to talk about 4 simple strategies that would allow us to show up and be our best version. Now, that best version is whether we're working in the field, whether we're just trying to be a better person overall, or in fact, if we're trying to overcome a challenging situation. And so, in looking at these different 4 strategies, I know that a lot of times we talk about resiliency, we talk about being resilient. But what I'm going to do is discuss strategies eventually that will allow us not only to become resilient, but we want to sort of ask ourselves after resiliency, what comes next? And being able to understand what comes next, we got to be able to understand that when you become resilient, when you overcome a challenge, how do you maintain that? How do you make sure that you don't go back? And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Now, during this discussion, I can already tell that people have asked questions. And so I'm just going to just urge you again to ask questions, ask more questions, because I don't want this just to be an me talk to you or the Lieutenant Smalls talks to you or Brooke talks to you. I want this to be an active exchange of me learning from you and you learning from me and you learning from us. That's really important. So the more questions you ask, the more I'm able to understand what exactly I need to be aware of. And it may, in fact, require me then to go and try to understand something a little bit more. So please ask questions, and then we'll have a little time in the back sort of to answer those questions. And so now when we're looking at exactly what resiliency is, what being resilient is, what in fact, how do we define this? Well, the dictionary defines resilience or resiliency as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness, the ability to get back up after getting knocked down, after falling, and being able to recover. Now, no one knows exactly why, but at the end of the day, there are times and multiple times that we in fact fall down. Our whole life is a lot of times built on falling down. Our whole life is built on being able to get back up. But for whatever reason, some people can't just get back up as quickly, while some others can. And so what we want to do is be able to have a dialogue, encourage a conversation that allows us to sort of explore why 2 people who can in fact experience the same tragedy or trauma can in fact, one person can look at it, deal with it, and go through life and bounce right back, while another person struggles. They become addicted. They in fact start going down a perpetual style in life of just constant insanity. And in order to be able to put that in perspective, I want you to take a look at this picture on the screen. And in that picture, you'll see 2 different individuals. You're going to see the person on the left, and you'll see the person on the right. Obviously, that's me. But not only is that me, but that's you, that's us, which is on the left is what it looks like to be in a perpetual state of constant behavior that's a lot of times based in making wrong decisions, which are even worsened by the fact that we may partake in excessive alcohol or drugs. When you're already making bad decisions, it gets much worse when you throw in alcohol and you throw drugs into it. And then you look on the right side, and that to me is the picture of resiliency. Now, the guy on the left looks like he's in shape and he has things well rounded, but the guy on the left is actually in prison. And that's a picture of me on one of my few times I was able to be out of solitary confinement and take some pictures. And like I said, you know, it looks like I'm in fact in shape, but I probably was in the worst shape of my life mentally. I was in the worst shape of my life spiritually. I looked at myself in a way that was destructive and that was violent. How I got there is what we're going to discuss today. And what allowed me then to transition and become resilient and become that man that you see on the right who makes the quote and creates the quote that says, I learned how to fight wars without ever having to pick up a sword. In my 2015 TED Talk, I want you really to be able to listen to this and be able to understand how that ability to recover and to be resilient actually occurred. So going to the next slide there, as I mentioned, I want to be able to talk about different things. And part of being able to discuss my journey is to tell a story. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell a little story that you may have heard before. And if you had, it's okay. I may, in fact, put a little bit of a spin on it, or it may just be something that we really, really need to hear again. And so this story is about villagers, right? So these villagers are pretty much, they're in a village and they're next to a river, and they're just doing what villagers do. They're doing this, they're doing that. And at some point in time, they look toward the river, and one of the villagers says, whoa, hold up, what's going on? There's a baby in the river. And so then that villager runs and does what most of us would do when we see a baby floating in the rivers, which is we go and they pick the baby up. They take care of the baby. They make sure that the baby has all its toes and fingers, and they make sure the baby can communicate. And they really work hard to make sure that that baby is safe. They don't know exactly where the baby came from, but they know that that's what we do. As a community, we take care of those who are vulnerable, those babies. And so eventually, as they're taking care of that baby, there's another one comes down. And so they rush. They say, oh my gosh, there's another baby in the stream. And they go grab that baby and they start working with that baby. They do exactly what they did with the first baby. And then eventually at some point, there is a conversation amongst the villagers, and they're saying to themselves, because as they're talking about this, there's more babies coming down the stream. More babies are coming down the river. And they talk to each other, and then there's a split. There's people who say, well, you know what we need to do? We need to actually go upriver. We need to figure out what's going on. And they ask themselves that question, which I'm sure you're asking yourself, where do all these babies come from? But then there's another population that says, well, hold up, we can't spare any hands because we got to make sure that when the baby, if they keep coming in, and we want to make sure that we take care of them. We want to make sure that they're safe. We want to make sure that they have everything that they need. And soon another man or woman comes in and says, well, hold up. I understand that we need resources here. But at some point, we do have to understand where these babies came from and where they're coming from. I mean, is there a plague up the river that's going to come to us? Is there some type of evil individual that's putting babies in the river? What is going on? And at some point, they do make the decision that what they need to do is they need to go and figure out how to prevent these babies from coming down the stream. And so when we look at these babies and we look at the stream, we look at the river, what it really is human services. And I know that there are people in the audience right now that work in human services. And they feel as though, you know, it's heavy work. It's constant work. The babies keep coming down the stream, but they know it's important work, so they keep doing it. And there are people who are working on the preventive end of the stream. They're actually going out and they're educating, they're talking. And in this human services field, we become exhausted. We become completely focused on whatever it is our job is to do. And it's important to understand that everyone plays a vital and important role. And what I'd like to do is when we're talking about this human services field is when I talk about the 4 strategies that allows us to be our best version, think about how you feel when you've had a long day. when you still are trying to do what you're supposed to do, but yet it feels as though it doesn't work and you're just running on a treadmill. And so understanding that this river is the human services field, I want to be able to say 100% that I was one of these babies in the river. And eventually I was picked up. And when I run to the next slide, what I want to do is talk about the fact that being one of those babies in the river, I too had some preventive, I had some reactive, but I had a lot of different circumstances and situations that allowed me to be the man that I am today in front of you and be able to talk about this in the way that I am. See, because by the age of 13, I had 12, I had engaged in being involved with alcohol, drugs, and a variety of things that made my already bad decisions even worse. And at around 14, I became what they call a junior high school dropout. A lot of times we hear about high school dropouts, but I became a junior high school dropout. And eventually I became 1039-260A3. And I'll get to that. But before that, again, I'm in school. Around 12, I get kicked out of the public school system. Again, bad decisions that are worsened. They're worsened by things that we put into our lives that allows us to feel better about our circumstances and our situations, but doesn't actually create any solutions. And by the time I was 14, I ran away from home, I left. And I started my journey in multiple juvenile facilities, juvenile detention centers, being on probation. And by the time I was 17, I was waived to adult court. And while I was a young man in the juvenile justice system, I want to say that there are a lot of things that happen. And ultimately, I made my own decisions. And ultimately, I worsened the decisions I was making by being involved in the things that I was being involved in. See, by the time I was 16, in one of the juvenile facilities that I was placed in, I decided one night that I didn't want to be there any longer. It was a locked facility. And so in the middle of the night, I assaulted the staff, I left. And that in itself created my journey to the adult system, because that placed me into adult court. And then while I was on run, while I was still out and about, living life very, very raggedly, very impulsively, which was even fueled worse by drugs and alcohol, I ended up being arrested for robbery, willful injury, attempted murder, and multiple other charges that dealt with a night ending of multiple bad decisions. Nights that I never, ever want to go back and live again, but nights that in fact live in my mind to this very day. And so those charges pushed me into the Iowa State Penitentiary. And by that year, I spent my 18th birthday in solitary confinement. I spent my 19th birthday in solitary confinement, my 20th birthday, my 21st birthday, 22nd birthday, 23rd birthday in solitary confinement. I spent a total of 4 years altogether in solitary confinement. I spent a total of 6 years in prison, again, by making bad decisions. And at some point in time, as we go to the next slide, you may be wondering, how in the world are you in front of us talking to you right now? And I'm going to tell you about that if you want to move to the next slide. Let's see. And so there's multiple things that happen. I was mentored by some of the older prisoners. I was sort of given a lot of books, and I would read these books. And when I read these books, I became very, very my own way educated. I became very aware. And I started realizing more and more that life was a lot more than what I was actually doing, that life was a lot more than what I thought it was. And so eventually, while being in solitary confinement, being in that dark, dirty cell, being in an environment that was so chaotic that you can never hear yourself think, not having any visits from family for over 6 years, I started finding in that dark hole the light and the virtues of life. And I did it through being mentored by multiple prisoners, some who are out today who still to this day mentor me. I learned the virtues of life. I learned how to, as I mentioned in the very first slide, how to fight wars without ever having to pick up a sword and without ever having to be violent, making better decisions, being a better person overall. And I played a lot of chess, and we would sit on our cell floors, and we would focus on what we needed to do to get out, to stay out. And I could have went to prison, and I could have just got involved in a lot of the other things that was happening where I just started repeating the same trend. But instead, at some point, and through reading these books, through constant discussion, as a matter of fact, they would call me the contentious young man because I always argued about so many different things when I would read the books. And I read books that I never would have ever imagined I would have read. Everything from Plato's Republic to Friedrich Nietzsche to Sun Tzu to Clausewitz to anything you could think of that dealt with philosophy. And also, I picked up the understanding and the value of learning how the law can, in fact, help me out. And I started learning about the law in so many ways. But as I sat there and we would play these games of chess, and I started learning how to really, really, truly become resilient in ways that I never thought I could be resilient in, I learned 4 lessons from chess that I still carry with me to this very single day. 1, respect all people, no matter their differences. Understand the importance of every piece on the chessboard. A lot of times when you play chess, you learn that this piece is really powerful. You learn this piece is powerful. But ultimately, every piece has value. Every piece makes up the board, the game. Just like everybody that we run across, there's somebody who's going to know something you don't know. So we should really, truly take the time to listen, to learn, to become a better person of who we are and to be our best version of who we are and can be. And that comes from being able to understand and value the differences in who we are and the different experiences that we, in fact, have had. 2, that we protect the weak. Now, see, the pawn doesn't have a lot of power in the beginning of the game. But I want you to think about this because, in my career, I've had a lot of different conversations. And when I'm relaying this particular lesson, I really look at it like it's life, which is in the game of chess, if you've played that game. But we always, for the most part, we always have heard the term, don't be a pawn or whatever. But in fact, understanding chess, if you protect that pawn, if you allow that pawn to go through the board and it doesn't get taken, it gets to the very end, that pawn can, in fact, become anything that you want it to be. See, the pawn, in fact, is the most powerful piece on the board, but the pawn, like a lot of people who are going through changes, that are listening to this here conversation are thinking, man, I need to check into some treatment, or I need to do this, or I need to change my life. I need to be a better person. I need to start making better decisions. Now, they don't realize their potential, but they're starting to think about it. And so when the pawn, if you protect it, if we protect the people who need it the most, those who in fact fall victim to tragedy, to trauma, and they don't just get back up and become resilient immediately. If we in fact protect them, guide them, teach them, if we take the things that we need, that they need in order to become better people, then they can go on to becoming the person like myself, sitting in front of you today, talking about my life and who I was. 3, be humble. Play the game as if every single move counts. Nothing in life is an automatic. Nothing in life, in fact, is a given. But if we play the game, if we live life purposely with intent, we become better versions of who we are. And lastly, practice restraint. Don't chase the pieces. Play the game to win. And so as I played games against so many different of these older gentlemen who really, truly took me underneath their wing and taught me a better way in the most unlikely place, in a place where you had multiple choices to make. They took the time to give me the right information. And so as I played chess with these gentlemen, I would get beat a lot. I would lose a lot of games. And a lot of times it was because I was chasing the pieces of, and these days we probably call it chasing the bag. But in fact, I should have been focused on just going through the daily effort, because see, resiliency is not something you accomplish. It is a process, and it is an active process. One, in fact, that you do not just get. You put the effort and the work in every single day. And when you're able to do that, that allows you to see the hard work. That allows you to see the fact that it's going to be a process. And as I mentioned, an active process that just continues to go. And jumping to the next slide, I took these 4 lessons and I said to myself, well, now that I'm out, and when I do get out, what do I need to do? How am I going to stay out? How am I going to take all of the valuable lessons that these gentlemen have been teaching me that a lot of times I didn't listen to? And that's why I spent so many years in the solitary confinement. A lot of times they still gave me the information. They believed in me when a lot of times I didn't believe in myself. And when they believed in me and I saw myself inside of who they were, and I was able to truly take everything that they were saying and give it to me to be a better version of me, I sat there on the last day in, and I still remember to this day, and I said, how am I going to do this? And if you look in that picture, you'll see me. I'm the one that's to the bottom, a little thinner, and I have the sunglasses on. And that was literally my last day. And I said to myself, how am I going to make this work? It was simple. It's easy, right? Well, yeah, in theory, but in reality, it was going to be a lot of hard work, and I knew it was going to be a lot of hard work, but I was willing to do that to become a better version of me. So I knew one thing in particular, which was this. I knew that I needed to obviously gain employment. And I would love to say that they set me up for success, and they set up the prison exit for me after being in since I was literally 17, and before that for a couple more years in juvenile facilities. But in fact, that wasn't the case. I knew that if this was going to happen, I couldn't wait on Superman, because there's no Superman coming to my life. Never has been. And I can't wait on something that's not real. So I said, I need to enroll into college, and that's what I did. Immediately, I started working fast food. And you know what? I knew that it was going to be difficult. I knew it was going to be tough to be able to go from being in an environment that was not really real, but was really real. Because I'm in an environment where everything is extremely violent. Mistakes don't just cost you a couple hours of work, but it can cost you years inside of a box. And so I eventually I said, well, I need to be able to translate. I got to take those things that are good, those things that let me be a better me, and I have to take those and I got to build on those. I got to take every single obstacle that's ever been thrown at me. I got to catch it, and I have to build, and I have to continue to build. So going to the next slide, you'll see that when I got out, after rolling into college and after being involved in getting a job, I knew that education was going to, in fact, be my golden ticket. I knew that education was going to be something that I needed to do. So eventually, my education involved me getting an associate's degree in criminal justice, actually pre-law, paralegal services, as well as then obtaining a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and then obtaining a master's degree in criminal justice. Now, I just want to say that I did this master's degree in the same college that where as a youngster, I would go onto campus and they would chase me off. I would go to the campus and I would get my master's degree. It wasn't easy, but I did it. And I knew that it would take daily effort to get that. And eventually I said, it doesn't stop there, because what I want to ultimately do is influence how we sentence youth, how people make decisions. Maybe somebody can take the utter chaotic life that I lived and they can learn from it. They could be better themselves. And if they do that, then maybe it was worth it. See, because I left out of there feeling and knowing that I had taken so much. I had taken so much, so I needed to give. I needed to give. And so as a result, I eventually started volunteering at the same facility that I broke out of, that I was a youth in. and that I didn't always have the most pleasant times in. And I did that for about 6 years. Me and another gentleman who was my mentor, Rashid, and we continually went up there, no charge, no nothing. We went in and we just started working with the youth. We started giving because, in fact, to give is to receive, and to receive is to give. When you give genuinely, you receive genuinely. To be a better person means you have to be unselfish. And I knew I had taken so much in life. I hurt people, my own community, this community. So I needed to change who I was to be a better version. And more importantly, to give out much more positivity than I ever in my life ever received. And also I had given out before myself. And eventually I did go on to work towards a PhD as well. Now, when you look at my professional career trajectory, you'll be able to see that I have I've worked at the same facility. I eventually went on to get promoted, and while working in that facility, the same facility again that I escaped from, got prison charges from, and I knew that people had to take a chance on me. I knew that I couldn't necessarily do something and all of a sudden people say, oh, that's great. And that's the thing I really want people to understand who are on that track to resiliency, is that you have to understand that just because you decide to make a different decision today, it's going to be some work. It's going to be an active process, and people may not trust you, and it's okay. It ain't that you have something to prove to anybody else, but you have something to prove to yourself. And when you prove it to yourself, then you're okay when people question you and wonder about you. And over a course of time, you'll start realizing how those moments will turn into time, and that time will turn into who you are. And eventually who you are will turn into your future. And so I went on to also work at that time for the state as a social worker as well. And then I created my own nonprofit as well as my own consulting company. What I like to say is that I'm a time traveler. I'm always going back and remember, what would I say to me if I was there? That's what I need to say to this person, this youngster, this family. And being able to be that time traveler allows me to be humble, allows me to be my best version, and allows me to talk to people in a way that is empathetic, that is real. It allows me to talk to people who are working in the field as though I get it, I understand it. And when I get it and I understand it and I can talk to them in that way, then they can understand that I know that they definitely have to feel a little bit of anxiousness if they're just starting out. They feel as though sometimes it's empty work because there's no, you don't get a lot of things in this field. And to go through this field and to be a person who's needing the help, you have everybody questioning you. So again, when you give though, and you give, you will receive. And so going to the next slide, understanding that I'm a time traveler, understanding that going through all those different realms, I can always go back. I can always think about where I was in a way that doesn't glorify, but in fact, in a way that allows people to understand that I know I get it without necessarily saying exactly why I get it and what I know. And that allows me to be authentic, because when you're authentic, you can truly be who you are, unapologetically. I went on to do 2 TED Talks, multiple podcasts, and I'm in the process right now of finishing starting a YouTube channel where I will do multiple interviews with people in the community. I will provide insight to criminal justice, mental health, public health education. And in doing that, my goal and my hope is that people will take my story. People will take the things that I've been through and that other people go through, and they'll learn something from it. They'll be able to take from that in ways that they haven't been able to take from anything else. And so at the beginning of this here conversation and this exchange of learning, I said to you, I wanted to talk to you about what comes after resiliency. What comes after being able to say, I have overcame? Because remember now, this is an active process. This isn't something that you just do and that's it. So if this is an active process, let me give you the 4 principles that I utilize to be my best version and to understand that every single day counts. And so we'll jump to the next slide. Now in life, when you're looking at trying to make changes and you're looking at, what can I do to be my best version? We have to understand these 4 strategies they have their golden mission, and then they have the shadow mission. Going to the next slide. And the golden mission is the one that is right, that is good. And if you take that route, you'll be able to understand that it has value. And if you know that it has value, then you can incorporate these strategies that will allow you to be your best version. 1 principle is be platinum with your word, meaning be intentful, be purposeful. Us as human beings, as the human animal, we have the ability to make a mistake and continually punish ourselves in word and in action. So the way we speak to others has to be important. Yes, I get it. We know that that's obvious. But the way that we speak to ourselves when nobody else is listening is very important as well. Secondly, the second principle is always be your best version, and understand and know that your best looks different on different days. Your best today may look like you're just talking someone off a ledge. You're just able to get out the bed and not use that particular day, or that particular day, you were able to go and do the leaps and bounds. The shadow missions of those is that you're unrealistic. You don't think about everything that goes into where you're at and where you've been and what you do. So the next principle is wrap yourself in immunity. Basically what that means is that being in this field, whether you're working in it or if you're somebody in the human services field who needs help, understand that by not taking things personal, it allows you to live outside of other people's minds. And what that means is that if I don't take it personal, and that means I can get the most out of it. If we never know who's going through what, but we do know that when people go through things, they do act certain ways. And when you're able to not personalize it, you're able to be your best version. And then lastly, the thing I want to always emphasize is that the 4th principle is that you have to emphasize self-care. Self-care is truly non-negotiable, personally, professionally, or any other way. If you can't take care of yourself, how can you take care of anyone else? This is what's going to be able to create the longevity of being able to come back and do the same work every single day, or to be your best version every single day, and to create those changes you need to make that is going to keep you out of jail and from using. And so I'm going to play this video if we're able to play it. And this is the video here is about taking care of yourself. So go ahead. Can that be heard or not? we go. Okay, you can go ahead and stop it now. All right, so yeah, perfect. Thank you. So I'll just leave that there, and I know we're getting to the end of this this presentation. And the last thing I just want to, and if we go to the next slide, you're just going to see a picture of myself here, which is my dog. She always makes sure that I'm very relaxed and everything. And we all have our different things we do. And the last thing that I want to say, and I want to jump to the next slide, is this. And this is just a small, quick story that says this. If I told you I wanted to give you $100, and you would probably say yes. And I told you, well, in giving this $100 to you, I'm going to step on it. And you say yes, I'm still going to take it. And I said, well, hold up. No, instead of just stepping on it, I'm going to crumble it up and I'm going to throw it in the trash. You're still going to take it. More than likely, you will. And then I said, well, hold up. I'm going to get it wet. I'm going to throw it down on the ground and I'm going to step on it. More than likely, you're going to say yes. And when I ask you, as I've asked audiences in the past, why is it? And that's because that $100 will never lose its value. And just like the $100 never, ever loses its value, people do not lose their value. A lot of the clients and the people that you're working with have been stepped on. They have went through the ringers. They've had constant levels of trauma. And we got to always remember that their value is truly important. But just like them, you as somebody in the human services river, you go through things too. You feel like you've been stepped on. It feels like you're running on a treadmill, you're not going nowhere. Well, you have value as well. And so at this point, I want you just to truly just take the time, just a moment at the end of this, just to thank yourself for the work that you do. And when you go into the last part there on slide number 16, I always like to provide a couple different books, a book list. So these are a book list of books that I've read, that I still read, that are really, really great. And I always encourage people to read them. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Thank you for taking time to give to me, because I definitely am receiving. So thanks a lot.
Jeff, that was great. Thank you so much. That was so powerful. And, you know, that testimonial and just your experiences will definitely I've already touched many people with the comments here. So again, thank you. And thank you to Lieutenant, thank you to Lieutenant Smull. Thank you to Brooke Brown for your wonderful presentation earlier. And we do have a few questions that I'd like to present. And let's see here. I don't know if Lieutenant Smull is still on. I think this question would be for him. Somebody's asking about the Good Samaritan law. And wonder if Lieutenant Smull could answer that question.
I actually can. The thing is with the Good Samaritan law is you have no duty as a citizen to intervene if you don't want to, but you are protected under the Good Samaritan law to assist somebody in medical distress. So if you are equipped with it, you have the knowledge to perform the type of task that you need to do to help save one's life, I would encourage that. I would do it myself if I saw somebody in distress, even if I was working or not. So I would encourage that to save people's lives.
Wonderful. Do you guys see that a lot, Lieutenant Smull? People enacting the Good Samaritan law, or people, you know, when you go to a scene?
I've actually have had people that remained and actually administered Narcan to individuals that were overdosing. A lot of occasions we will find that Narcan was utilized, but then the people left. So, you know, I've seen it both ways.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And then let's see here. This question might be best for Brooke. What alternatives are available to prescribers and parents so they have the option of not using stimulants for ADD and ADHD. I'm assuming she's talking about Ritalin or Adderall. What are the alternatives for those medications in those disorders? Brooke, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, so a lot of times behavior therapy can help a lot. I know B has worked with a lot of children who have ADD or ADHD. There are other medications as well. And they're not prescribing meth, they're prescribing stimulants. So we just want to make sure there's clarification there.
So you say counseling and therapy would be our good alternative forms
Alternatives.
to
Yes.
that prescription medications. Wonderful. And then another question for you, Brooke. Is there a rise in drug use or overdose among pregnant women that you've seen?
So what I've seen, I mean, any use among pregnant women is too much. I don't have statistics as far as what we're seeing in our programs. I mean, we are seeing more than we want to.
Yeah, just anecdotally, I haven't seen many pregnant women come in, at least to the emergency room with, we see a few, but I haven't seen, I guess, an increase in that number with overdoses or drug issues. Let's see. Thank you, Brooke, for that. Looks like we have a question here. And Jeff's typing, but I think it would be good. We have a little bit. He could talk about this, and it's a question. Jeff, you can, if you're on there.
Yeah.
How it's the question there. I think you were typing on. If you want to answer that question.
Oh yeah. So the question that was asked to me was, let me see where it's at here. So how well would you say the youth relate with you due to you being one who has lived with what they endure? Does it become an equal exchange relationship with them wanting to give more effort, resilience because of them being able to trust your input? And so what I had responded with was, it's a careful walk to walk, right? Because when you're dealing with youth, they sort of look at you as, well, you've done it, you're good, so let me keep doing it and I'll be good, right? So you got to be careful with that. And also, it's just the way the people who know me, who have worked with me, know I don't discuss that with the children that I've worked with in the professional setting, but I can talk to them in a way that lets them know that I know. And when they know that I know, then they're more willing and they're more able to say, you know what, he does get it. And he can't, and I can call them out on some things that they're just telling other people that may not necessarily know. And I could do it in a way that doesn't sound as though I'm questioning them, but I am holding them accountable. So then they have to really now think about what they're saying and what they're doing, because I'm a big proponent that you can act yourself into a better way of thinking, or you can think yourself into a better way of acting. So hopefully that answers that question.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then there's a question about, have we gone after the medical professionals that are producing, manufacturing, distributing, and issuing these drugs? And I'm assuming Deborah's talking about opioids or opiates. And, you know, there has been some physicians and other providers that have definitely had to, that have relinquished their license or have gone to jail for overprescribing. And then there's also been multiple class action suits over the last really couple years where the biggest one is the producer of OxyContin has had to, they've been fined hundreds of millions of dollars, and that company is actually dissolving due to all these lawsuits, which is good. They're the ones that produced OxyContin, and there's a multitude. Actually, if you just Google class action lawsuits on opiates, there is a ton of them there. So yes, there are people. They are having to, you know, they are being, prosecuted. There is a lot more though that could be prosecuted. Looks like here we have an anonymous question for Lieutenant Smull. It looks like asking a question about, I'll just read it. In regards to the slide you showed about the deaths from overdoses last year, do you have a number on those that were within the first months of re-entering the community from correction facilities? I feel there are too many deaths from sending drug addicts to prisons and not treatment facilities. They get out and don't have the same tolerance.
I don't have those numbers. I didn't prepare those numbers. I'm sure there are some cases of that. I'd have to research that to get an answer that would be accurate and correct for the person that committed that.
Yeah. Lieutenant Smull, you mentioned that there was 0 deaths of fentanyl this year. Are all of the overdoses then get an autopsy with a full panel, with a drug panel done? Is that how we know that there's been 0 fentanyl overdose deaths?
From my understanding, yes. The fact that once we have a suspicious death or a suspected overdose death, my understanding, will do an autopsy and the toxicology to determine what kind of substance contributed to that death. I mean, sometimes we run into the situations where it's a cocktail of different controlled substances. So without that toxicology report and then the pathologist doing their job, we won't really know until they come back with all the information. Remember, this is just from the police department. You have medic and other medical facilities. There's times that medics get called to overdoses that they don't know it's overdose till they get to the hospital, and then we normally or won't get called on that. So that's just from the numbers from the Davenport Police Department that we've documented.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, thank you. And I don't know if you know this, Lieutenant, I should know this, but should opiates be classified as a Schedule II drug? I think, I'm not sure what they're scheduled as right now. Do you know, Lieutenant?
Well, actually, there are some opioid substances that are Schedule II drugs already because they have a medical value. It's when it goes to Schedule I is when they have no medical value, like your carfentanil and your acrofentanil, all the synthetic man-made opioids and drugs. That's why you see them as Scheduled I.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so Schedule I, the cocaine, fentanyl, or carfentanil, and Schedule II, I'm sure, is probably oxycodone, medications like that. And then there's just a couple other questions, and I think that's it, guys.
Closing out.
I think we're closing out. We're going to put some contact information and referrals. We're going to email that to everybody.
Excuse me, Dr.
Yeah.
Gertz. I didn't know if we had a little bit more time. I believe there's some questions in the chat room as well.
Oh,
I don't know
okay.
if you, there's been several questions. I don't think people put them in the Q&A bar in the chat. And if you had a moment just to answer a few of those questions, since we had still a little time left, correct?
Yes. Let's see here. If Kenan, do you see those? I do not see those questions. So if you want to ask them, that would be great.
So there's one for Brooke. Can you tell me if use of opioids over a 5-year period does irreparable harm to the body?
Yeah, so that's really going to vary from person to person. No matter what substance you're using, it can cause irreparable harm to the body. The biggest thing is how it's impacting the organs, how it's impacting the brain. And again, it's depending on what substance you're using, how often you're using, your age. There's a lot of different components that impact that.
Wonderful. Aaron, do you have another question there that you see?
Not that I can see.
Wonderful. Kenan, do you see any? It's hard to see them when they're in the chat, truthfully.
I'm not sure if someone asked this one from Lisa. It says, if you have someone or a teen that has ADHD and is taking medication for that reason and has already tried, oh, I just lost it. So scared. Sorry, let me find that question again. There we go. If they're taking the medication for that reason, has already tried to overdose, and who has been to Robert Young Center, how do you know that they won't try again, not being in the household of that individual? I believe that would go towards Brooke.
Hi, so I guess I'm a little confused what that question is. I would suggest if they're having concerns with their teen taking medication, that they would address that with the prescriber.
All right.
There's also a question, and I think Kevin Smull answered it indirectly, but the question was, why is fentanyl one of the most common drugs used to mix or lace with other drugs?
Part of the reason is because it's so cheaply made over in China or manufactured down in Mexico. They can cut it and then they can extend their product. So if it's heroin, they can cut it with fentanyl and then they can double up with the heroin that they had. It's all pure for monetary gain. Again, it's the cartels and their whole purpose is to make money. But that's why, and plus a lot of users that I've talked with over the years like that euphoric moment that fentanyl provides.
Lieutenant Smull, what is shake and bake?
Shake and bake is actually a process of manufacturing methamphetamine. They also call it the one-pot method. I had spoken in my presentation that before the explosion of ice methamphetamine, most people manufactured methamphetamine in the United States. There's been a significant drop in lab seizures over the past several years because of the ice methamphetamine being produced down in Mexico and then flooding the United States with it. Now, are there people still manufacturing methamphetamine? Sure, just not as the frequency because the availability of ice. But to answer the question, a one pot or a shake and bake is actually a plastic container, like a Gatorade bottle or some type of thick container, and they add the chemicals in that, and they actually manufacture the meth oil inside that container. That's what it is, and it's your your lithium, your pseudoephedrine, along with the sodium nitrate and all those chemicals to make the meth oil, and then what they use to get it to turn into solid methamphetamine or the powder methamphetamine, they put together what they call the HCl generator, a hydrogen chloride gas generator. And what that does is turn it into a liquid, from a liquid form into a solid form of methamphetamine. The HCl generator is made up of sulfuric acid and table salt, or hydrochloric acid and aluminum foil, which produces hydrogen gas, which is very dangerous in itself.
Wow. Well, thank you for the clarification. I thought shake and bake was a way that you prepared chicken for dinner, but so I guess it's not. But anyways, thank you. And I think that would be the end of our. Well, we have one last question here. Do you have any sources in relation to the dermal exposures in relation to fentanyl or furanol? I don't have any resources. I don't know if Brooke or Lieutenant Smull, do you guys have any resources for dermal exposures?
I do not.
My resources would be online, but there's some from a biotech lab. I can send out that information.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you guys. Again, thank you for our wonderful 3 speakers. Thank you for all of our sponsors. We could not have done this without everybody. Please be safe and have a good day, guys.
And one last thing, before everyone leaves, we will be sending out a survey to your email. So expect to see that coming just for some feedback on today's event. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I want to thank everybody for having me today, and Brooke and Jeff Wallace, thank you for your presentations. They were outstanding.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, thanks everybody for presenting. You guys did great, good information. I want to thank everyone for participating as well. You guys have a great day.